Hi.
Hi. Hi, everyone. So this is our second Facebook Live event. I'm Jenifer Talley. I am sitting here with Dr. Andrew Tatarsky. We are at the Center for Optimal Living here in New York City. And so we wanted to just start with an overview of who we are, what we're doing here. We're going to talk a little bit about what harm reduction is, what integrative harm reduction psychotherapy is, the therapeutic tasks that are part of the model, and then we'll go into more detail about how we utilize self-management skills and mindfulness in our work, and then we'll do some demonstrations so you'll get a sense of the tangible skills that we teach our clients, and you'll be able to walk away from today's event with some skills that you can practice on your own as well. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end, so if you want to start writing in comments and questions, then we'll try to get to them by the end of today's event. So we're really excited to be here and just want to welcome everyone who's tuning in.
So I just want to acknowledge that Polly McCormick just joined us. She's got a wonderful program in Orange County, California, and we just had a really wonderful meeting this past weekend with a whole group of people in Los Angeles that are involved in developing a harm reduction therapy network. So what we're doing here at the Center for Optimal Living is really being replicated throughout the United States and in many centers around the world, where there's really a growing network of people working with harm reduction therapy, psychotherapy, substance use treatment in a variety of different contexts. So these Facebook Live events are really coming from a wish to communicate and share the work that we're doing here at the Center for Optimal Living, and also network with and help to create a community to exchange ideas about new developments in this very exciting field. So maybe we'll make a few overview comments about harm reduction and why we think that it is really essential to the effective treatment of people that are struggling along the entire spectrum of substance use problems and other risky and addictive behavior. The field, as I'm sure many of you know, has been dominated by a particular addiction recovery narrative that really places abstinence-only treatment as the gold standard and frequently as the only acceptable goal. And we think that that severely limits who can get into treatment and is often kind of really not relevant to the needs of where people are at the point that they become concerned about their substance use or related kinds of issues of problematic gambling, eating, and so on and so forth. So the harm reduction framework really emerged as an alternative framework for setting up helping relationships, or we might even think of it as a framework for managing positive change that can happen in a variety of contexts, in therapy, in education, and even in self-guided kinds of processes. So we'll say a few words about what harm reduction is, and then talk about how it has tremendous implications for psychotherapy, counseling, and substance use treatment. Do you want to say something about sort of just the basic core principles of a harm reduction shift?
Sure. Well, I think one of the primary ways I think about harm reduction is that truly meeting clients where they are. So it means approaching the therapeutic relationship really with no agenda other than to be helpful, to really welcome clients in, embrace the diversity of goals that they present with, and then work with people who may not yet be ready, willing, or able to embrace abstinence as a goal at the beginning of treatment. And so we are able to be flexible in how we work with people, and then we can guide them through a series of different ways of looking at their relationship to substances and move them along this path to develop positive change strategies to minimize risk, reduce harm, and then hopefully empower them to make really substantial changes to their lifestyle.
So for us, some of the core shifts from that abstinence-only model is that a harm reduction process accepts any positive change goal as a valid goal and a valid starting point for a positive change process. then around people's goals and motivations that may bring them into a positive change process. As Jen just said, we can start where they are, wherever they're ready to begin that process. And then we set up a collaborative relationship. And within that relationship, we can work together to really assess, come to understand, the nature of these difficulties, parse out all of the complex factors that may be contributing to that, and then together come up with a set of goals and positive change plans that are uniquely tailored to each person. So we're always working, in terms of its therapeutic implications, we're always working to stay in partnership, to stay in alliance, to be working together, to be on the same side, so that as a therapeutic team, we can then figure out, where people need to go and how they can get there, but in a way that's really uniquely tailored to that person. So that's a kind of a general overview of a harm reduction therapy model. In our work here at the center, we've developed our version that we call Integrative Harm Reduction Psychotherapy. And what that really means is sort of two things very simply. We see those harm reduction principles as the frame that frames our relationships, frames our alliance with people, starting where they are, with respect, with empathy, with acceptance, compassion, affirmation, and collaboration. Within that frame, we want to bring together as many different therapeutic modalities that will address, the biology of what they're struggling with, the psychological and emotional factors, the social, cultural, relationship factors, but in a way that's going to be uniquely tailored to each person. So we've got lots of different therapeutic techniques and strategies, health-related interventions that we can bring together, but always in a way that's negotiated collaboratively with each individual. So we see the problem behavior as existing within this complex, unique human in a unique social and political and relational environment. So therefore, the approach is uniquely tailored. Secondly, we've identified 7 therapeutic tasks that are kind of our way of modeling what we actually do in the room when we're working with people. And by the way, we've also begun to work on adapting these therapeutic tasks and strategies to a self-guided change process. And on our website, on the homepage, if you just scroll down a little bit, you'll see something that we call the 6-step guide to positive change. And we've got 6 tasks there that you can actually read through and work through on your own to accomplish some of what we're trying to do in psychotherapy and substance use treatment. So that's something we'd love you to check out and give us some feedback about, see if you find it useful. So as Jen said, today we're going to focus in on our 3rd therapeutic task, which we think of as enhancing self-management and self-regulation. There are many different ways that we might think about how self-management and self-regulation are a kind of prerequisite to behavior change. And that when we think about changing behavior or changing habits, without having really worked on cultivating certain skills and capacities to manage discomfort, manage uncomfortable feelings that often give rise to problematic behavior, it can be a setup for failure. So self-regulation and self-management, we might think of in a very general sense as being about cultivating capacities to sit still with a feeling, sit still with distress,
An urge.
sit still with an urge, so that we can place, as Jen says, and maybe you'll talk about this a little bit right now, a kind of pause around the urge, which enables us to develop greater tolerance of that distress. And then there are all sorts of things that become possible from that moment of sitting still with an urge.
Right. And so one of the the ways that I like to think about mindfulness is exactly as Andrew's describing it. It's really just the capacity to just pause for a moment. And then I refer to that as checking in. So what's here now? What are you noticing? What are you saying to yourself? How are you narrating this moment? What's the story that you've constructed about this experience? How does that then influence how you're feeling? What you then might be like prompted to do in terms of action or behavior? And then how does that lead you to have a really strong urge or a craving to use a substance? You know, can we just sit still and notice this? Take note and observe what's here now. Really pay attention to that useful information. And then during that pause, really consider, how do I want to respond? How do I want to be in response to what I'm noticing as I tune into my experiences? And then that opens up a whole menu of options in terms of how people might then respond. It could be just to delay use. It could be to engage in another self-care activity. It could be just to do nothing, you know, just to sit.
Can I make a comment about that? You know, we might think about what we call addiction or an addictive response, which can also be related to an impulsive response or a compulsive response, as maybe a deeply ingrained, overlearned habit as a way to respond to a feeling. So this addictive response is a way of moving away from, or managing, or expressing, or trying to contain or cope with something, a triggering feeling, a triggering circumstance. And so the idea that Jen is talking about developing a capacity to interrupt that impulsive, addictive, compulsive response really short-circuits the addictive process. There are many things we can say about that, but to the extent that we can respond to that moment with breath, with clarity, with curiosity, with self-reflective awareness, with kindness, with self-compassion, it then opens up the possibility of considering alternative choices. And we could think about that in terms of a habit change process, or rewiring the brain, or opening up possibilities of greater self-care. You know, there are a number of different metaphors or levels of abstraction that we can be talking about that. But as we make alternative choices, we're actually working in new ways of being with ourselves that we might think of as promoting healing, growth, and positive change. Or some of you might prefer the concept of recovery.
Exactly.
So do you want to take the folks through some very basic mindfulness strategies that we can practice together?
Sure. I do want to point out that one thing to keep in mind is that if you are working with someone who has a history of trauma, you do want to be really cautious about how you introduce mindfulness practices, and to really be attuned to the person that you're working with and make sure that the person is actually ready for this type of practice. And so my experience working with survivors of trauma, I often would teach mindfulness by first beginning with noticing things that are external. So using the senses, noticing what's, using sight, smells, sounds, and being mindful to what's going on in the outer world, and then gradually developing the capacity to move inward and to kind of turn the lens inward. So that's just one thing that I wanted to mention, that there are possibly some risks with practicing mindfulness that we do need to be sensitive to. So for those of you that are tuning in and listening, if you want to join us, I'll invite you to, if you're sitting in a chair or a seat, just see if you can feel both feet on the floor, notice your posture, and just sit in a way that feels comfortable, that feels not too forced or rigid. And then just, if you'd like, you can let your eyes gently close, or you're welcome to keep your eyes open. So whatever feels appropriate for you in this moment. And I'm going to walk you through what I call just a simple checking in practice. So just start by noticing the connection of the feet on the floor. So noticing the weight of the feet on the floor. Noticing the weight of your seat, your hips. Letting the body really just settle in. Maybe lengthening the spine a little bit. And then just start to notice your own breath. So without changing the breath or altering it in any way, just notice what it feels like to be breathing right now. All right, so noticing the temperature of the air, moving in, noticing how it feels as you exhale. And again, if you get distracted, if you get lost in a thought, that's okay. Just take note, and then you just begin again with the next breath. And that's the beauty of this practice. You can always just begin again with the next breath. So just noticing the breath. How does it feel? Almost like you're feeling it from the inside out, as Tara Brach said. Feeling the breath moving through the body. Almost like there's a spotlight on it. And then see if you can notice the types of thoughts that are here. How are you narrating this moment? What are you saying to yourself? Can you observe with kindness? And then taking note of what sensations you feel in the body. What emotions are here? Again, just taking note. Just observing what's here with curiosity, with kindness. Again, noticing the breath. So a nice question is, what's here now? What do I notice right now? What's happening in the mind? What's happening in the body? Feeling tones do I notice? And how's my breath? How am I breathing in this moment? So then whenever you're ready, you can let your eyes gently open up again. Take another deep breath. Shift around in your seat and stretch. So when I ran the mindfulness group here at the center, I would often start my group with that just very simple checking in practice, just to welcome people to really notice and observe what's here and to really bring that out. Then we'd start our group just by noticing where are we all at today? What do we need to be working on today?
Thank you, Jen.
You're welcome. Or if you want to share what that was like for you.
Yeah. Certainly that helped me to feel more present with my feeling, with my sensation, with my experience with the group of people that are out who are with us. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, maybe we can all think together about, how can we use mindfulness practice in our daily lives, and particularly around one of the things that many of us here are working on with ourselves and with our clients and with our colleagues, is the habit change process or the recovery process. So I want to suggest that every action, whether it's verbal or physical, begins with an urge. If we can catch the urge, if we can catch the behavior at the moment when we experience the urge, and we can bring mindful awareness to that urge so that we can accept, become aware, and breathe into the urge without judgment. On the one hand, and we call that urge surfing, we're surfing the urge. We're sitting still with the urge. Now, in traditional recovery language, if that's all that we do, it might be simply white knuckling. But from that place of surfing the urge, it seems to me, there are all sorts of other things that we can do, as we alluded to before, that can promote healing, growth, and positive change. First of all, simply surfing the urge and not responding to it in the old habitual ways actually over time helps to extinguish the intensity of that urge. That's a deconditioning process. When we don't reward it with the old rewarding behavior, over time the intensity of that conditioned urge fades. So if all we did going forward was practice urge surfing, the urge surfing can be a very important way of interrupting these automatic habitual reactions. We have a great friend in Pittsburgh, Pavel Somov, who has written a number of books on mindfulness, and he talks about habit as mindlessness. And what we're suggesting is we can replace the mindless habit with a mindful response. And then we frequently suggest that people can now bring this mindful urge surfing to the activities that they're interested in making some change in. So another thing that we can do is look more deeply into the urge. We might call this unwrapping the urge. That is, what does this urge want? What is the inquiry process? Mm-hmm. What does the urge want to get away from? Is there a part of me that lives inside of that urge? Needs, feelings, dissociated, split off, disowned parts of me that somehow live in the urge and need to be discovered, recovered, and reintegrated. And as we can get clearer about what the urge wants and what it wants to get away from and what's embodied in living in that urge, it becomes possible now to think about alternative choices to care for myself, to express what has been living in this kind of unexpressed netherworld of that addictive space. From this standpoint, we might think about addiction is an experience that expresses something but disguises it. And this inquiry process into the urge enables us to rediscover and find words for what's living there that now become possible to integrate into the rest of our lives in ways that are in accordance with everything else that's of value to us. Mm-hmm. So I wonder if we don't have too much time left, but I might just take 2 minutes or so to invite you to practice some urge surfing with me and have some direct experience.
And then maybe once you do that, I can just do just a brief kind of overview of how I actually help my clients begin to develop these capacities to be more mindful, because it is a daunting process and it's not easy. It takes a lot of practice and patience. So I do want to make sure that we talk about that too.
Mm-hmm. Great. So if you're game, or you might simply observe, but if you're game, as Jen began before, I'd suggest you or invite you to take a comfortable seat in your chair. Feel your feet on the ground. If you'd like, you can do this with your eyes open or closed. And now, bring your awareness into this present moment, becoming aware of the sensations of your breath, bringing this kind of accepting, curious attitude toward what you're aware of in this moment. Body sensations, sensations of breathing, thoughts that pass through the sky of your mind, emotions, other perceptions that you become aware of, sound, taste, smell, what you see. And now I'd like to invite you to see if you can recall a moment where you've experienced an urge to do something that you've been wrestling with, that you've been curious about, you've been thinking about making a change with. And see if you can recall the experience of that urge, what you felt in that moment, how you experienced it in your body. Where did that urge arise? Sensations in your chest, your stomach. Are there thoughts that came with that urge, or come with that urge in this moment? Thoughts about what that urge wants. And just notice what happens as you bring accepting awareness, curiosity, and breath to the experience of the urge. Does it stay in one place? Does it move around? Does it become more intense? Is it hard to hold on to? And now you might move into the inquiry, what I think of as unwrapping the urge. Begin a dialogue with the urge. What part of you lives there? What does the urge want? Is there a story that comes to mind or memories associated with that urge? And now I'd like to suggest that you let go of the memories, let go of the sensations, let go of the urge. Bring your awareness back into this present moment, feeling your body sitting on the chair, your feet on the ground, refocusing on the breath, bringing your awareness back into this moment, what you hear, what you see, what you smell. And when you feel like it, open your eyes, come back into the room, rejoin this community.
As we're back on. So, it's some technical issues just now. It's a good thing we've been breathing.
Yeah, we've been gone for a few minutes. But I wonder if there's anyone out there in the community that's practiced with us that wants to share a question or a comment about how you might make use of these techniques, or many of you, I'm sure, are already making use of these techniques.
Mm-hmm. There are even questions about how to begin the practice, too. Where do you begin?
So you were going to say some things about how you really work with the folks that you work with.
Right, so depending on the person I'm working with, and we really talk about what's realistic, what's feasible in terms of you starting a meditation practice. I don't think it's realistic to expect a person to, in that moment of really high distress or a strong urge, to be able to apply the practice without having had a lot of practice with it ahead of time. And so I often invite my clients to identify something that they're already doing in everyday life. So it could be something as simple as walking the dog, taking a shower, brushing your teeth, eating a meal, and then beginning to practice mindfulness during one of those activities, just to slowly start to notice what it feels like to practice that kind of present moment awareness. And then we can maybe develop a very small practice that a person uses, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes a day, to the extent that they're able to fit it into their lives. And then with time, we see people being able to apply the practice during moments of severe distress, really strong urges and cravings. But it does take time. It is a practice that you cultivate, gradually. So, I think that is an important piece of this, that you have to keep practicing it and kind of flexing that muscle, if you will.
And maybe just to point out the obvious, when we practice urge surfing and unwrapping the urge and going into the experience in a safe space of a therapy session or a group or with a friend, and we have the experience of going into it and coming out of it, that becomes an experience that then people can use in their lives when they do feel triggered. Be with that experience, sit with it, maybe even go into it and try to unpack or unwrap, what you're actually feeling that's giving rise to the urge. And that could actually lead to, over time, a greater capacity to meet those moments with awareness and with choice, which is really where we're going with all of this, to empower people to make better, healthier choices about their relationships to risky behavior, but also to their lives and to themselves in a more general sense.
Right, and one thing I wanted to mention too is that people often come in assuming that cravings are bad, right? Not liking them, not wanting them to be there, viewing them as a sign of failure. And we really want to shift that so that people become curious about cravings, curious about what information is conveyed and carried within the cravings, that we can unwrap it and get really interested in the meaning behind the urge. What function is this serving?
That's such an important point. To shift from the demonization of the urge, which is related to stigma and the old disease model, that is that this is your disease talking, and all you need to do is not listen to it or wrap it up or somehow control it. Whereas what we're suggesting is that we need to create safe spaces to help people actually move in, because there are vital, positive parts of oneself that have been trapped or disowned and are living in the urge, maybe for safekeeping almost, until we're ready to recover, discover, recover, and invite those parts of ourselves back into our life experience and our sense of wholeness. So that's really it's another way to think about a recovery process, that it's really about recovering parts of ourselves that have been disowned or lost for one reason or another, so that we can become more whole as human beings and more fully present in our lives.
I know we're about out of time. So
do you want to make some comments just about the trainings and the certificate program? We have a number of different ways that people can learn about the work that we're doing.
So we've gotten a lot of questions about an online training, and I just want people to know that we are absolutely working on that, so stay tuned. So for now, if you're able to join us in the New York City area, we have several exciting trainings coming up. So Andrew and I have developed a year-long program in harm reduction psychotherapy. So it's a certificate program, and we're accepting applications now until August 15th. So we extended the deadline until August 15th. We also have an intensive 3-day training that we do every fall, and so this year it's scheduled on December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and it will be at the New School. I'm also leading a special training with Jill Satterfield on inner awareness, working with trauma, chronic pain, and substance use in New York City as well on September 16th and 17th. And so all of this information is on our website, which is centerforoptimalliving.com, and if you click on the tab that says training, you'll get all of this information. And then if you want to follow us on Facebook, if you like us on Facebook, we'll post about events and upcoming trainings. And then you can also join our mailing list by going to our website. If you scroll down to the very bottom, you can then sign up to join our mailing list and get updated and receive our monthly newsletter as well. We also invite you to contact us, email us with questions. We're happy to connect with you.
So I just want to also mention, I mentioned at the beginning that the work that we're doing is part of this global network of people that are carrying harm reduction therapy, harm reduction substance use treatment into their organizations, their communities, and their countries. I talked at the beginning about an initiative that just started this past weekend in Los Angeles to bring together a Southern California network that will be providing mutual support to really bring this work to Southern California. I also noticed that we have a partner, a colleague who's been doing this work to bring it to the Philippines, of all places. Inez has just joined us, and she's the executive director of an organization called No Box Transitions in the Philippines. We've also got partners in Vancouver and in Beirut, Lebanon, and in Athens, Ohio, and in inner city Brooklyn, and in many other places. So as you learn about this work and connect with the network, you should know that you're connecting with this wonderful group of courageous, heart-centered, caring people all over the globe. And we hope that you'll bring this work and are into your communities.
So we're planning on doing these Facebook Live events about once a month. So we will be in touch and update you with the next date of our next one. And if you have any ideas for topics or special things that you'd want us to focus on, please let us know, and we'll try to accommodate that. So stay tuned. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you either in person, those friends of ours that are nearby, or in a future Facebook Live event. Take care.
Take care. Enjoy the weekend.